Hello, and welcome to the Project Podcast. My name is Jeremiah. In this very first episode, our conversation will center around the album as a format and as an artistic art form and how it has been affected by modern culture and business of music and where we see it going in the future from here. I'll be joined by Dan Bell, drummer for the Mobius Project, and guest contributor Chris Herman. Before we get into the conversation, though, I do want to give a quick note about this podcast. This podcast is an extension of the Mobius Project, which is a band here in Kihei, Hawaii, and we certainly don't claim to be experts in music. We have no experience within the recording industry. We are huge music fans and musicians ourselves, and so these topics, too, we feel do directly affect us in terms of what it means to write an album, what it means to create a song, what it means to consume music. And as music consumers, we consider ourselves to be, just as you should, important cogs in the wheel of the current music industry and current music scene. And so these conversations that we have over these podcasts as they take place are our way of venting and clarifying for ourselves where exactly our place falls, and doubly so as musicians. So I hope you enjoy the conversation, and please feel free to leave comments at the end.
Hello, welcome to the first ever Mobiuscast. This is Dan Bell, the drummer from the Mobius Project.
And Jeremiah Dempster, guitarist.
And we are also accompanied by
We're joined in studio.
Joined in studio.
I'm Chris, Maryland groupie.
Band-Aid. And today we are going to be talking about...
Throughout the course of this podcast, we're going to talk about a bunch of different things, but I think the first thing we want to discuss is the album format. We're currently in the process of writing an album.
And we had a lot of discussions about kinds of albums and what makes a good album, and how the album is the current music industry is kind of destroying the modern album and what a lot of us have grown up listening to in terms of albums and not just singles, and the sort of revolution back to the single format when we're talking about like Frank Sinatra and the Temptations.
Well, I mean, I've read some books about like the history of the album, and way back in the day, with Sinatra stuff, they would pour their efforts into one or two singles, and then the rest of the album was filler or new songwriters who were kind of new to the scene, or covers of their heroes and stuff like that. And you'd have one, maybe two songs on an album that was really like the push. It was what they wanted people to get, and then it evolved over time to where Pink Floyd is writing whole albums, Bowie is writing whole albums, those kinds of things. And now with digital demoing, we're going back to that.
A lot of those albums that you mentioned had a specific reason to be an album. They were like concept albums, and they were like a body of work, not just a collection of songs, random themes and things. Like they were like sort of like a novel.
So you start us a whole story to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that was the utilization of the album format as a format, as a in the same way that a short film is different from a 2-hour feature film. One song is different from a whole album, and you can do different things with the format. And I think that now people are kind of ignoring the potentials of the format for the almighty dollar, to say, because they can sell one song. If I put everything into one or two songs, that's what people are going to buy anyway.
Just to play devil's advocate, though, don't you think that it is kind of idealistic to think that, especially in terms of the music industry, that there would be nothing other than an almighty dollar that they would be interested in?
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Not that I am not an idealist, and I believe that the album is important, but I'm just saying that.
Well, I guess the main point behind the way I feel about it is simply, if you're going to write in a whole album, if you're going to take the trouble to write an entire album, give me a whole album. Don't shortchange me by pandering to the lowest common denominator, and simply going for the the person that is going to buy one or two of your songs. If you're going to write a whole album, give me a whole album, so that it's worth my money.
So you're talking to the bands, though. You're not talking to record
No,
companies.
I'm talking to the artists, and well,
But don't you think though that it's the record companies that have sort of created this problem? It's the band, and a lot of the bands are following lockstep, but it's been the record companies are the reason that I think that we've been experiencing this sort of like lull in quality albums and such a huge spike in the downloading singles and the popularity of a single as opposed to.
Well, I don't think the popularity of downloading a single is actually a new thing.
Mm-mm.
I think it's a play off an old tradition. I mean, how many times when you were younger did you hear people talk about, oh, I really only bought that album for that one song or those one or two songs? It's just nowadays.
I felt like
the capability.
a lot of bands that when we were younger, a lot of like grunge bands and things. When I first started listening to rock and roll, were like the seventh song was always the best song, and it was like right in the middle of the album, and it was always the first single from the album, and you know that they put that
it was like
there.
the third song.
I don't know. For some reason, I always thought it was a seventh. Like I can think of like Bush did it, and I don't know off the top of my head, I can't remember. But I just remember like looking through a lot of my albums and like looking at song number 7. There it was, and oh, that was the first single, and that's kind of the best song on the album.
But I think that's what digital downloading has done is just exacerbate a trend. You know, people don't have to buy the whole album for that. They can just buy the song.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't think the record companies are doing this to us necessarily because
But people are buying into it though.
people are buying into it.
Yeah,
But
big
it's
way.
tradition. It's a tradition thing. It's like if you're gonna have a band, if every band wants to put out a whole album. I want to put out an album. That's like the thing. But they don't utilize the album format. They string together 10, 12 singles or individual songs, and then they put that out. And so I think it really is a combination of laziness on the record industry part and that sort of like artistic desire for tradition. Like you're not a real band unless you put out albums.
Do you think that if bands started like sticking it to their labels and were like, we put ourselves in a house for 6 weeks and we wrote this body of work and here it is, and there's no one song that we think is better than another song, and you can single the crap out of it if you want, but this is the album and here it is. Release this, and the record company was like, well, we asked you to write, 2 or 3 singles that would stand on their own, and the band was like, too bad. Do you think that would change the trend?
I don't know. See, I don't think it's done on purpose the way it is. I really don't. I think it's just that's sort of like you have to identify singles off of an album to throw onto the radio because for some reason we're still stuck.
But
in
bands
radio
definitely
plays.
write single. Like they write it because they know that's going to happen.
Yes, and I agree fully. But I think that where it actually has to come from is labels and record companies and DIY bands have to start to look at the album, like deconstruct that format, and look at the album as an art piece in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And you either write an album or you don't. And if you don't write an album, don't put yourself through the hell and purgatory of having to have that many songs to string together. It shocks me. It shocks me that the 3-song EP is not. I mean, I've said this numerous
Let's talk
times.
about this for a second.
Okay. It shocks me that nobody has latched on to the idea of, hey, if we don't put out an album, if we throw all our money and all our weight behind 3 songs or 5 songs, and we put that out, don't worry about a full-length album. Let's just do 3 to 5 songs. Then they can all be singles, and we can put them out one after another on radio play, and we can release them on iTunes. And if we want to have a physical product, I think it's the physical product that's actually holding us back. But
Yeah.
like we can throw them out all on iTunes and sell them all as singles, and then 3 months from now, 6 months from now, rather than the year or 2 years that an artist takes off in between albums, rather than doing that, we throw these all out. And then in 6 months, we can turn around and do 3 more. And then in another 6 months, we do 3 more singles. By the end of it, you come to the end of a year, you've done that a few times, you have 12 songs that you sold during the year that were all singles, that were all worth buying. And, they can get various amounts of radio play based on, how long you left them in rotation. I mean, you obviously don't want to be flooding, like we've got 5 Britney singles on the radio right now, but, you can be much more judicious about how you put them out. It costs a lot less. You can charge a little bit more because that's the final product right there than you would for a 3-song EP. It's that short term of I'm not going to get $10 for an album right now, but I can get 5. I'm amazed that more people don't take advantage of that format. And then it makes it much more impactful when you say, hey, we put out an album. I wrote an album. And people go, oh shit, an album. And they go after it, and they'll buy the whole thing. Can you imagine the amount of revenue that you could generate if you were selling 3-song EPs like 4 times a year, and then you plunk an album out 1 year?
Yeah, I see a lot of different benefits for bands and the record companies if they would latch onto something in more of that format than the annual or like biannual or triannual album kind of thing, because typically, a band will work on an album for anywhere from like 6 months to a year, and they'll release it and they'll tour on it for a while, and they try to keep the energy and the vibe and the excitement of that album going for a while, for as long as they can. They'll put a single out, a few months later put another single out, and they'll try to get as much as they can. They'll try to squeeze blood from that stone as long as they can, and then it's back in the studio after another year or two, and kind of that process. But I see what you mean. If the bands would, and it would also, I think it would save money in the well, at least maybe even in the long term, because they would be going into this. They wouldn't be spending so much time in the studio all at one time. They record a few songs and then they could hit the road. Everybody knows that bands make most of their money from touring, from merchandise, not from music sales.
Not anymore.
So if bands were not spending so much time in the studio all at once, and not spending so much time, and record companies weren't spending so much money, having them in the studio and promoting an album, but doing smaller and more consistently working on promoting singles as they come out with few song EPs, because that'd be beneficial for both sides.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about the album itself, why we think it's important, and why it would be definitely like a negative thing if albums continue down this road of being completely non-relevant? I remember Black Sabbath saying that they recorded albums where they only really focused their energies on one song or 2 songs, and the rest of it was seriously like filler that they threw in the last second. They just wrote crap and they threw it on there.
Well, that's not a new idea. Like we said, that goes back into the early record industry.
Or even where record companies will just stop supporting albums and just have bands write a single and just put that single out.
It's also modern practice. I mean, I've heard of bands that were signed for one song. Put that one song out, and if it does well, then you get a larger record deal. You get a larger deal, Yeah. So and that makes, that to me makes a lot of sense. I think that it's not so, and this is not something that's specific to the album. This is something that's specific to the idea of format. What can you do with a format? And using the limitations and implications of any format. It ignores the potential for, what you can do with 12 songs. Anytime you get over 3 songs or 4 songs, you're making a statement when you put them together.
Yeah.
And you can't avoid it by putting
together.
That's why
greatest hits albums.
I despise greatest hits albums. And unless you use them as an opportunity to do something special. Pink Floyd's greatest hits album was a very interesting experiment, because not every song they stuck on there was actually like a single, like a greatest hits, but they went back through a lot of their classic material and put together what they considered to be a new statement using older songs. I thought it was great.
A lot of greatest hits albums are record companies who have the band has fulfilled their deal, and they're just trying to get one last thing out of them.
Yeah.
One last money making device before the band is completely.
I thought Incubus's greatest hits album was a good example of an interesting way to do a greatest hits album. You write a couple new songs to put on that. You release it with a bunch of non-greatest hits, almost like B-sides. That was a double disc. And then you also give access to a ton of back content with pictures and videos and B-sides and live recordings. And that almost wasn't a greatest hits as much as it was a retrospective of where they were up until now. Do I think Incubus is a little bit too new to be doing a retrospective. Yeah, I kind of disagree with the timing of releasing it. I think if you're gonna go for a greatest hits, you better have some great best hits. You better have some time behind your career, and they haven't even been out for.
They've been around for more than a decade.
Yeah, they've been around for more than a decade, but
And
10 years in music history. What is 10 years in music history?
Well,
That's
interesting.
One band. That's not even one full generation of band.
Yeah.
That's not even enough really time for like a scene turnover.
Mm-hmm.
Or a movement.
But for a lot of bands, it is a short amount of time.
I guess.
I'm sorry, it's a long period of time because some bands, can't even go like.
Well, yeah, years. But any band that can't last 10 years, do they deserve to have a greatest hits album?
Mm-hmm.
Similar
Touché.
With like REM, they've done like 2 or 3 greatest hits albums, but they're divided up by like decades. So you get their early stuff when they first started, their middle stuff, and then their 90s stuff or later. So yeah, they break it down, and I mean, when I listened to some of those, I heard stuff by them that I had never heard, just because a lot of it was either stuff that was, their early stuff that they were doing when I wasn't even born, or stuff that, wasn't on the radio that I wasn't hearing off of the single that was trying to be driven.
Yeah, I think if you use the greatest hits for something like that, they break it up by decades. Did they do that during the run? Or were those later?
It's been done maybe within the last 5 years.
Oh, yeah. See, that kind of makes sense. But then also REM has been out for quite some time. Somebody says to me, okay, REM is going to have greatest hits albums. I go, okay, that makes sense. Somebody says to me, Britney Spears is going to have a greatest hits album. I go, what?
Her careers came and went.
What? I mean...
She's a seasoned veteran.
I am a huge Incubus fan, but when I heard the news that Incubus was going to do a greatest hits album, my initial reaction was, already? Really?
But it's like I said, a lot of record companies, I know, like Head PE's record company did this, and Silverchair's did that, where it wasn't the band doing. A lot of bands don't even know that's going to happen until after it comes out, because it's like they've already fulfilled their record deal and they're gone.
Yeah.
But the record company still owns the property, so they can do whatever they want with it. So they put out a greatest hits album because they just want to get an extra.
Or it's part of the record deal. You do 3 albums and a greatest hits or whatever. If you make it
Stabbing Westward, that happened.
But I think that taking advantage of the format, of an album, and greatest hits is one example, but you take advantage of the format, and that could be a 3-minute song. The Ramones, they owned the Sex Pistols. They owned a 3-minute song, and they took advantage of the format of the song. Longer songs. Floyd owned the format of a song, that was longer. Bowie could own a longer song, and then you build that up to the album. What does the album offer you? I don't make if I'm writing a novel, I don't write a 1,000-page novel out of novellas. I write it as a novel. Mm-hmm. If I want something shorter, I write it as short stories. Now I may make a collection, and that's what the modern album is. It's a collection of short stories.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot less sense to me than utilizing the form.
People want novels. They don't want short story collection. That's the hardest thing. Like they've literally said, through novelists, poets, any kind of fiction writer, short story collections are the hardest thing to sell. And it's because they want that one big hit novel or that one singularity. And so if you have a collection of stories or poems, that's the hard thing to sell. So many poets today that I've seen more full, complete poetry of so many poets than I've seen the last 5 or 10 years.
You think that's because the masses don't want a poem.
Right, yeah. Or the poet's passed away or something. Yeah. But
I think what you should say is that they want the full...
They want the full experience.
They want it in one place.
I think a lot of mediums suffer that kind of underappreciation of what one work can do, as opposed. I'm thinking film too. There are thousands of short films made every year that nobody sees, nobody cares, and they'll be in film festivals and they're gone, and nobody buys them, because people want to film. People are used to full-length film, except for Pixar. But they had to put those in a collection.
I think in music there are very few genres that can get away with doing a full album of unrelated material. And it doesn't have to be a concept album. I'm not getting.
No, I know what you mean.
I mean, it should be an album that.
Go ahead. I know what you want to talk about.
A snapshot of time.
You want to talk about Morning View.
Okay, well,
Jeremiah's going to talk about Morning View.
I'm going to talk about Incubus some more. I would throw Morning View back out as an example of a good album that's not a concept album, but it's a complete album. And actually, any Incubus album to me is this way. Science, I mean, it has a consistent sound, but people always talk about how, Incubus, they change their sound every time an album comes out. No, they don't. They don't. It's that they...
I've said that.
It's that each album is a snapshot of time, and it's written together. And it makes sense together. That they don't just collect up a bunch of singles. And I feel like there are so few genres, and then bands outside of genres, but there's so few genres of music that can get away with a collection of unrelated songs. I think punk can do it, and I think that pop punk and even some poppy stuff can do it. My main thing with pop not writing albums is simply that it just doesn't make sense to me. But modern rock and metal and all these other bands, it's like the songs you get the same problem every time if it's not good. People go, by the third song, by the fifth song, it all sounded the same. Well, yeah, it all sounded the same because they weren't trying.
Yeah, they weren't really trying to write an album. They probably just had one idea in mind. They were going for a certain sound, possibly. A lot of bands do hey, in this album we're gonna try to push, go back to our roots or something like that, and then they'll write every song with that in mind. But they don't. But the songs that's why they all kind of sound the same because it's not a thematic motif. It's just a sound.
Right, and that's really every different. Song. That's different from what we're talking about with capturing a moment, writing everything together. It's when you explore a motif, or you explore an idea, or you capture a moment in time, you vet it, you explore it thoroughly, and you write slower songs about it, you write faster songs about it, you go through the full range of what that moment means, and you capture that all, not just exploring hey, I got a new
right. You got a new pedal.
And a new pedal.
Let's try this.
Let's try this. Let's try that. Let's, I'm really into, dissonant chords now, and so we're going to write every song with dissonant chords, or, the drummer got he's able to do double bass now, and so...
That was one thing that I always appreciated about Korn. I know Korn's got a lot of flack recently, and they actually just put out an album that was based around an idea that they wanted to go back to their roots. It hasn't gotten very good critical acclaim. It's an okay album. It's all right. It's it's listenable, but their albums were always pretty centered around wherever they were at as a band at that point. Whatever they were going through. I remember their second album, Life is Peachy, was very specifically sort of about all of the creative flow that they had sort of stopped up because they were touring for so long with their first album. They kind of hit underground success with their first album, and they were on the road for so long they didn't get to write, so they just wrote and then all of this came pouring out of them. And then their third album was much more of a reaction to the huge success that they found after Life is Peachy, and then so on and so forth. Issues was about all of the mental issues that John had been experiencing because of even further success and all those kind of things. But they were very they were very much a snapshot of this is what they're all going through right now, And then Head left the band, and then they put out another album that was well, this is who we are now.
Yeah, and that makes a lot more sense to me. And I in going to the idea of albums that hold up. I mean, I want to kind of skip over without disrespecting traditional album writers, bands that write big out, like Floyd, like Bowie with Ziggy Stardust. Those are amazing albums. They are exactly what we're talking about, but those are specifically concept albums. And that's something that's almost a complete aside. But I think Incubus does it very well. I think My Chemical Romance does it very well.
Pretty much every time when somebody asks me what's my favorite album, the first thing that always pops in my head is Deftones' Around the Fur. It's because it's my favorite album ever. But it does have a very, very through line consistency of sound and tone. both like in terms of the musical quality and also the vibe.
Yeah, of course, I would throw out White Pony.
See, and
I
I would disagree. That's an interesting discussion right there because I would disagree about White Pony being a good album. Like I thought White Pony had a bunch of great songs on it, but I felt it was really disjointed. Like I felt like everything after White Pony up until their brand new one called Diamond Eyes has been much more of the band fighting, and you can tell because like you have the metalhead, Stephen Carpenter, and then you have the big Cure fans in the band, like Chino, and you have a DJ. And I'm not quite sure where Abe's coming from, the drummer, but it always seemed like they were kind of fighting for like what they wanted, and I think like White Pony was a reflection of that. You have some really heavy songs, you have some really light songs.
But see, I think that maybe that's one of the things that brings it together for me is that I feel like as a collection of music, it's dynamic, and so that allows it to stand as a statement. As a single statement doesn't just mean, as we said before, it doesn't just mean that everything sounds the same. You need to fully vet an idea or fully vet a time period for it to hold together as an album, and I think White Pony does that for me.
It can be really risky to just for artists to do different, each song is almost a different style. But I mean, like Linkin Park with their latest 1 Minutes to Midnight. Before, every song on the previous albums, even though I like them, they all kind of had a similar vibe, similar sound. But with their latest one, they all kind of had a different style. And you could tell it was them risk-taking. And, yeah, they got a lot of, critical backlash for it, but I think it's an awesome album. Maybe also because it does have some thematic ties.
Yeah, and that album for them was the album that made me appreciate them as a band, because I always fought really hard of not liking Linkin Park because of sort of where they started and who they ripped off of and what,
Actually, for Linkin Park, I have to go back to their previous album. They caught a lot of crap for making their previous album only 30 minutes. Yeah. Meteor. I listen to that album and I hear a statement. I hear one.
It's definitely tight.
It was a very tight. It was an epic. I mean, that's a great way to put it. It's an epic 30 minutes. And it was also based around other stuff. There was an art project that was involved in making that. It was like a whole mural thing that they did. And I mean, that for me was a tight statement. And I'm not so tied to what I'm looking for from an album that going into it, I'm like, I need 45 minutes of music for it to be good. Mm-hmm. It could be whatever it is if it utilizes that whole format.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier about bands putting out albums that have some good stuff on them, but they don't feel like a complete piece of work. That I think what makes a good album is it feeling like complete and satisfying.
I completely agree.
In whatever that means.
It doesn't go too long.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It's
It depends.
I'm actually a really big fan of New Found Glory. I know that they're pop punk, but their albums to me feel like they're a little long sometimes. I mean, I know it's a pop punk,
sort of like a comedy, like romantic comedy that's 2.5 hours long.
Yeah, but by the time you get to the end of it, they've so thoroughly explored the sound of the place they're in.
Okay, I get it.
You're done with it before it's over.
I thought Green Day's album was like that.
Yeah, 21st Century Breakdown.
18 songs. Every track is a full 3 or 4 minute song. Yikes.
Well, that and they were kind of just redoing American Idiot,
which is a brilliant album.
Which is funny.
Like they were trying to outdo themselves, and I just felt like it was just too much.
Yeah. I think somebody that's actually really good at the album format right now that falls into some of those similar genres is Paramore. Paramore does a really good job of writing their albums. All 3 of their albums are good, tight statements, and they all have, I hear everything, people talk about them, I hear everything from, you can hear, maturity through the albums to all their albums sound similar, but no matter what you think about that, the albums all stand as snapshots of time. Yeah. Their first album, All We Know Is Falling, was about something. It was about their guitarist leaving the band and them dealing with moving on to fame. Riot was all about them coming into their own. Huh?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they had a guitarist leave the band and listen to the lyrics of All We Know Is Falling. I mean, that's exactly what the song is about, is they're going to go on and he has left the band. And them dealing with that. And then the next one is about them coming into their own and being their own band. And then you have Brand New Eyes, and Brand New Eyes is about them coming out of, it's about Haley's breakup with Josh and her now being with Chad and them moving forward as a band. The albums are about something. But they're a young pop they're not pop punk, but they're almost like pop rock in that same sort of thing, but they do it so well.
To use an example from like the black hole of everything, of cutting edge pop music and everything we abhor, I want to see Adam Lambert live in DC, and his CD is just like a grab bag of all these different styles. It really doesn't mesh well at all. But then I saw him live, and it was an interesting experience because he had said that he wanted the CD to be like a complete grab bag because that's the way the industry is geared now. That fans want the singles.
So you spoke to that specifically.
Makes
right,
sense.
And yet on the live stage, he actually tried to make it like a 3-act kind of experience where this set of songs was about this set of songs flowed into that, and it ended with this set of songs. Now him sitting on the stage and actually explain that to us verbally, maybe that insults the listener's intelligence. But for an experience like even what we were saying with, they make the most money from the live experience, there's a guy who he's a great vocalist. He has a good visual eye with, all kind of stuff, different stuff with live shows, costumes, dancers and shit. But, you need to give him great words because if the voice sounds great, but honestly, most of the words on most of the songs are just insipid.
Well, you gotta have some substance with your style.
Right.
No, I think that's interesting. Sort of like taking advantage of
the current trends.
So we've been talking about albums and why the album, when done well, is very important to music and art. And if you didn't have that, where would we be? But going along with, we're talking about recorded music, but there's also the argument that where would music be if it wasn't performed live?
Well, it's really interesting to think of our idea of music. When I say what's your favorite music, you think of recordings that you've listened to.
Yeah.
But recording is a modern technology, so it's in a relative. historically,
that's true. Before
short period of time,
turn of the century,
recording has completely changed the way we think about.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been live shows that have made me appreciate a band that I thought was just okay before that made me think they're amazing.
Absolutely.
But then there's live shows I've been to where I felt like I was just listening to the CD again. Yeah, so I was
or worse, live shows that made you appreciate the band less after you had thought, that they were worth going to see by listening to their recording.
I
think that would be a really good follow-up.
I think we exhausted this topic as far as we went to.
All right, thank you for joining us on the First Step Project podcast. If you'd like to leave comments or contact us about today's topic or future topics that you'd like to hear us discuss, you can feel free to email us at mobiusprojectband@gmail.com or to leave comments on the blog. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.